Hello friends, this is my Color Classic Mystic, which has a Macintosh LC575 motherboard inside, offering much better performance than the painfully slow stock motherboard. And this is my FloppyEMU from Big Mess of Wires, a fantastic floppy drive emulator that works on various vintage Macs and Apple II computers as well. Today I'm going to show you how these two guys can become friends. Even though I have a compact external Blue SCSI, which is a fantastic product by the way, much of the time I still find myself reaching for the FloppyEMU. And one big reason why is because the FloppyEMU will work on Macs that Blue SCSI won't, such as this Macintosh 512K, which doesn't have a SCSI port. Plus, there are times that I just want to download a floppy disk image from Macintosh Garden, throw it on the SD card, and not have to worry about making it work right using emulators. For me, the FloppyEMU is always fast and convenient. The reason I'm making this video today is because when we look on the back of this guy, there's a problem. The LC575 motherboard doesn't include an external floppy drive connector, making it impossible for me to connect my FloppyEMU. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I have saved a floppy disk image to the SD card of my FloppyEMU, only to go over to my Mystic and turn it around and realize there's no floppy drive connector. Yes, I have a bad memory. And it is so frustrating. At least it used to be. Thanks to Koba of Kero's Mac Mods, the frustration is over. This is K's Flippy Floppy kit that lets you add a connector to the back of your Mystic, specifically to allow you to connect a FloppyEMU. If you visit the Kero's Mac Mods website, you'll see that the Flippy Floppy is offered as a low-cost standard kit or a more expensive deluxe kit. I have the deluxe kit, which includes everything you need for installation in a Color Classic Mystic. Now, don't buy the standard kit if you're going to be installing in a Mystic, because that kit does not include this ribbon cable and does not include this back panel either. The included documentation says the standard kit eliminates Mystic-specific accessories so that it can be used with Macintosh, LCIII, and other Macintoshes. I don't know what the other Macintoshes are, but it basically is telling you you'd only want to buy the standard kit if you have a Macintosh LCIII. So definitely buy the deluxe kit. If you already know how to open a Color Classic, and if you know how to properly remove the analog board, you can safely skip to the next section. Otherwise, let's get started with the disassembly. What you'll need to do is put your Color Classic on a soft surface. I simply had a very convenient plush chair, which makes it very nice. It boosts it up to the right height. And you are going to need to start by removing the motherboard, which requires you to remove this back panel. To do this job, you're going to need to have possibly a screwdriver to remove the back panel, unless you have nice screws like mine. And you will definitely need to have a Torx T15. You don't necessarily need to have such a long neck as this, but I have linked this tool for you in the text description below. These bolts are very nice. I actually was introduced to these by Koba. And these, you can use a screwdriver if you like, but they're really great because all you have to do is just turn them with your fingers. And really fabulous bolts. I have put a link to them where you can buy them on AliExpress. And these are the 10mm variety, which is nice for this particular back panel. And it just pulls right out here, like this. And then our motherboard, we'll just grab it behind the ports here, and pull it up and out. So we'll now take out the two screws near the top of the machine, near the handle. And then the two screws at the base of the machine. We can then pull the top straight up and off. Now here is where the motherboard was. This is a metal shield down here at the bottom. Then we have the speaker area, and above that the power connector and analog board. We're going to have to remove all of this. You can see I have two speakers because I did the stereo mod. Check out my video on that if you'd like to do it. Most likely you'll only have one speaker to disconnect, but in my case I have two, so I'm going to disconnect those right now. I now put the machine on a hard surface to make it easier to work with. I have an alligator clip lead with two fairly large clips on both ends because I'm going to discharge the CRT. It's most likely already discharged because it has a bleeder resistor inside, but just to be sure, I'm going to clip one end to a flathead screwdriver, and then I'm going to clip the other end to where this green wire is connected to this exposed wire here. That's ground. Make sure it's connected there. And then I am going to put the tip underneath this suction cup, because underneath the suction cup there are little prongs there. Push on one of those, the other one just pulls right out. So I'll go ahead and remove my discharging clip, and we need to remove this clip as well. And on the opposite side there's a little clip you can pull on because there's little teeth in it. You're gonna have to pull on that. Don't pull on it too hard so you break it off. There's metal fatigue you might have to worry about, but it'll just pull right out like this. So here's where I just disconnected that. And then down here behind these wires, there are these wires here that are connected to a little white connector, and it's not locked. You just wiggle it and pull up on it, and then it comes right out. And then over here we have a little connector which also needs to be disconnected. And then we have two more things. We want to pull this straight back, just slightly wiggling it, pulling it straight off the yoke here. And then we need to disconnect the black and white wires. They are in a locked connector, so you're going to need to take your flathead screwdriver and insert it in here and kind of twist it towards this direction to depress that locking mechanism so it will come right out. So here it is viewed from the back. We're going to pull out the analog board, so we don't want this to catch on anything. And this wire we're not going to pull out, right? It's going to stay up here. So I'm just moving things a little bit out of the way because, and also this, you don't want it to catch on anything, because the analog board we're just going to pull straight back, right? Just like this. And viewing it from the side, it just pulls out like so. Now there's these little grooves in here that allow you to actually pull it up and then out. Now here's our floppy drive. Since I have the stereo speakers, I need to remove one of them, which isn't too hard since it's just affixed with Velcro. To begin our Flippy Floppy installation, we need to remove the ribbon cable from the floppy drive. Just put it down there. And then we're going to insert this board, which only goes in one way, into our floppy drive. Make sure it goes in as far as you can push it. And then after that, we're going to take the ribbon cable that we just removed, and we need to connect this into the connector which is closest to these two blue resistors nearest to the edge of the board, like so. And now you'll notice that we have one connector free here, and we want to take our Flippy Floppy ribbon cable and connect it into that one. And then we have one last cable that came with the Flippy Floppy, and that's going to connect to this 5-pin connector here. You'll notice that one of the pins is missing, and that's nice because it means our cable will only go in one way. It doesn't matter which connector you put in, but I want to hide the exposed pins. You can see the exposed pins here, and so for me to do that means I need to use this particular connector, and then you push it down. And of course, try not to put too much pressure on that connector. You might also consider putting in these connectors into the red PCB first and then sliding it in. Whatever order makes you feel comfortable, so long as you don't crack off that connector which connects to the floppy drive. And now you need to push the cables down so that we can route them down and out the back. Also this cable too. Now I'm going to put my speaker back in and see how well that works. It's going to be kind of a tight fit, but
Well, what I can say is I can't push the speaker back as far as I had it before because the edge of the speaker touches the FlippyFloppy board. But there is space here, and it's not going to create a problem. So I guess we could say it just barely fits, but it fits. Now the only way to do a test is with the analog board and the motherboard reinstalled, so I'm not going to show that on video, and I'm just going to skip to the reassembled machine. Now before we proceed further, we need to talk more about any cards that you might have installed on your LC575 motherboard. If you do not have an Ethernet networking card or an Apple IIe card like I do, which is what this is, then you can happily use the back panel that Koba has created and includes in the deluxe kit. But for people like me who have the Apple IIe card, unfortunately, I cannot use K's back panel because this panel is not compatible with cards. Thankfully, Frank Conforti came to the rescue. Frank has been working with CAD software since the mid-1970s and is the author of CAD books like Inside MicroStation. Frank also authored several Mac User magazine articles pertaining to CAD software in the 1980s. I didn't directly ask Frank to create anything, but I did talk to him one day about the FlippyFloppy back panel incompatibility problem with the Apple IIe card. And because Frank also owned a FlippyFloppy kit at the time, he considered that conversation a challenge to test his CAD design skills. Frank spent 12 to 14 hours over the course of 2 weeks creating 7 prototypes and then a final version back panel. I drew a set of vector icons for Frank, but after a couple test prints it became clear they didn't look nice. So there aren't any icons on his final version panel. Even so, Frank said he's still working on a possible solution that could appear in the future. Frank printed several final edition panels using his BMOW X1 carbon 3D printer and very graciously shipped them to me. He said it takes 67 minutes to print all of the individual parts in order to assemble one panel, or about 4 hours to print all 4 of these samples we see here. Now at the top we see the deluxe kit panel from Koba, and then at the bottom we see Frank's panel. There's a very slight difference in color because the two filaments are not exactly the same. I put all this information in the text description below. I don't know what filament K used, but I have linked for you this color filament that Frank used, and also there's another one that's, I believe, similar to what K used that I also put in the text description for you, but both are extremely well crafted. Both are, of course, the same dimensions here. Some of the minor nuances, the air vent holes are a little bit smaller on Frank's, and he did that deliberately as a part of the design. Also, we see, even though K's design is not compatible with cards, he still has this punch-out hole for the cards, but it really serves no purpose because you can't use it with cards. And the reason why is because this hole is actually the one that you will have on yours. I think this is a prototype that K sent me quite a while ago, and so I don't believe yours will have a hole here. But mine has a hole here and here. And basically, K was thinking maybe put the switch here, maybe put the switch here, the toggle switch for FlippyFloppy, I mean. But if you put it here or here, it doesn't matter. It would still touch the card. If you don't have a card, then you could mount it in either location, but K finalized the version where it would be over here on this side because his thinking, he wants to take his left hand, reach around the machine, and flip the toggle switch. But in order to do that, you had to sacrifice card compatibility. And so that's what Frank is addressing with his design. His does not have a punch-out hole, it's just a permanent hole because it's really designed for cards. But even if you don't have any cards, you could still use Frank's design because all this would be is just a hole which increases airflow. And both K and Frank put the FlippyFloppy connector in the same location, but the key difference is the toggle switch location on Frank's, which is compatible with cards. And it's the only place to really put it, if you think about where cards will appear, is right here. And Frank's design also has a little hole over here because the switch has a little protrusion that comes forward, and he made it so that that protrusion would fit in this little hole. There's no little hole over here. You can still install the toggle switch that K provides, it just that protrusion presses up against the back more. And well, basically those are the key differences. Now there's a little bit of a texture difference because I think Kay used a texture plate on his. Frank was experimenting with that, but he was getting warping when he used a texture plate, so he has printed his without any texture plate at all. And I personally think it's a little bit smoother, but it looks perfectly fine. Now taking a look at the back side, again the top side is Koba's Deluxe Kit panel and the bottom is Frank Conforti's panel. I believe C is the initial of his last name, and that's why the C is there. We see similarities. Both have a multi-part design. We can see this rectangle is the same as this rectangle. This was printed separately and then pushed into that hole there. And then also this little rectangle and this little rectangle were printed separately and they were pushed in. Now Frank went the extra mile and he actually welded his with a special soldering tip that you can purchase on Amazon that I've linked for you below, and you can use those soldering iron tips in two different kinds of soldering irons, and basically he just melted the plastic in different places so they wouldn't accidentally pop out. And then he has other tips in the kit, which I assume that's what Koba used here too, to sink these brass parts, these nuts here, into the plastic. And this is where the screws will screw in because plastic isn't strong enough for the screws, so both Kay and Frank used these brass parts for that. And there's a little difference in size in the clips that, you know, hold the back panel in on the Color Classic, but basically, whether it be front or back, both are extremely well designed panels.
Frank was being quite modest when he told me that a professional CAD designer could have done the job in only a few short hours. But Frank added that he deliberately took his time so that he could better enjoy the design work. Best of all, Frank very generously made his back panel open source and available for anyone to download at printables.com, a link to which I put in the text description below. Thank you, Frank!
Now with the machine reassembled and the motherboard installed, we see the FlippyFloppy toggle switch and the connector for the FloppyEMU, which we need to mount into Frank's back panel. Or if you don't have cards, then you would mount these into Koba's panel, but the mounting location is going to be different on K's, so this is what I'm showing you. I'm showing you Frank's. And you'll have to take off the nut in order to do this. So what I'm going to do is in the order of the switch first, which will go into this hole over here. The Koba panel would place it over here. And then I'm going to put in the connector here, and there are two screws. Now you don't want to yank on these. There's not a whole lot of slack, so you'll have to just kind of fiddle with it this way and then put in the screwdriver, you know, get your screwdriver in there and screw it down. But you don't want to screw it down too hard because remember, these are melted in there, and if you screw it too hard, you could pluck it out. So you just want to lightly screw in this. And this you can use more force. I would say use your fingers and not a tool, but just you're going to be screwing it down on the outside like this to hold it in. And here's that little protrusion I was telling you about, which fits into that little hole on Frank's panel. And with both now mounted to the back of the back panel, I'm just going to make sure my wires here are kind of pushed to the side so they're not riding on top of my heatsink. And kind of get them over a bit. And then we're going to put it in the bottom first because there's these little lips that catch down at the bottom. And you want to make sure you don't get the ribbon cable smashed. And there we go. And then to secure it, you just put in your screws or bolts or whatever. And then the FlippyFloppy connector goes into your FloppyEMU, and the FloppyEMU has this adapter. You need to take off the adapter, and then you'll have the matching connector that has the little protrusion on top, right? And you just plug that in like so. And then your Flippy Floppy switch toggles to left and right instead of up and down. I believe K's is toggling up and down, but this one will be left and right. And here is the coveted Y cable that accompanied the Apple IIe card for the LC575 motherboard. You can see the connector is right here. And there's a little bit more space to the left of this leftmost bolt than there is to the right of this. The rightmost bolt is right up against the hole. But if I attach it, you can see that it fits just fine. So now I have the power cable connected. The switch is still set to off, but I'm going to switch that to on. And of course I have my keyboard connected, because if you don't have a keyboard, you can't press the power button. And the switch is switched over here to the left. So I'm going to press the power button. And we can see that the LED is flashing red. And my FloppyEMU comes up. So I'm going to come up here and choose System 7.5 installer. There. And then this will continue to flash red to indicate that I am connected not to the internal drive, but to my FloppyEMU. And what do you know? It's booting off my FloppyEMU, not my hard disk. And that LED is showing you there, showing the track that it's reading and writing. Fantastic! Finally, my FloppyEMU can work with my Mystic. Thanks to Koba and Frank Conforti's work on the card-compatible back panel. And there it is on the desktop. Fantastic! Now, of course, if I try to put a real floppy in, nothing happens. And that's because it's switched to the FloppyEMU. You cannot use both at the same time, unfortunately, but that's the trade-offs. Okay, I have now shut down the computer, which is why the FloppyEMU is no longer powered. There's no LED light here. I need to warn you at this point. You cannot flip this switch when the machine is powered. And it's probably okay to switch it now, but just to be safe, I'm going to flip off the power on back, and then I'm going to flip the switch position. In this case, from left to right. And then I'm going to switch on the power. And now it's safe to power on the Mac. If you switch this when the machine is on, according to the documentation that K includes, you could damage your floppy drive controller, which means a chip on your motherboard, which is a big problem. So don't do that. That's why the switch is short and a little bit inconvenient to switch, so you don't bump it by accident when the machine is on. So always shut down, and for myself, for good measure, I'm going to switch off the main power switch too, then flip the switch, switch on the power, and then I can push the keyboard button like I'll do now. And now I get a blue LED. So the blue LED comes on and stays lit. And now we see that even though the FloppyEMU is powered, it's booting from my hard drive and not the FloppyEMU. So it will be powered, even if it's pushed right, which means the blue LED is on. It just will not be functioning. You cannot detect it. You can only use one floppy drive at a time. And then we can test to make sure that our internal floppy drive is working, because that's what the blue LED indicates. I can now put in a real floppy disk. And it mounts on the desktop and opens just fine. And there you have it, folks. Koba's Flippy Floppy is the perfect way to get a FloppyEMU up and running with your Color Classic Mystic. And thanks to the incredible work of Frank Conforti, you can now download and print a custom back panel that's compatible with either an Ethernet card or an Apple IIe card. So check the text description below, where I've put a link to Frank's page on printables.com.
Frank was also telling me that he intends to create a video showcasing his experience using a 3D scanner to accurately image a vintage Mac case part, which he ultimately intends to recreate using his 3D printer. Sounds pretty incredible to me, so I'll be sure to let you know when that video is out. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and please subscribe and click the bell icon if you'd like to see more content like this. Thank you for watching today, folks, and I wish all of you a wonderful day.